Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
I'm Jena Brown.
I am not JD Barker, but I am J. Kevin Tumlinson.
Yeah. JD is oh, what does he usually say? Welcome to Writers Inc. There, I did my JD.
Welcome to Writers Inc.
Yeah.
He's living it up at a yacht club.
Yeah, he's at a yacht club in Seattle, so I don't feel too sad for him not being here.
I don't
He's
feel
at a
sad.
conference. They're having a
All
conference.
right,
I've never heard
fine.
anybody have a conference at a yacht club before.
That is a
So
fancy conference.
I'm going to the wrong conferences.
Yeah.
That's what I'm discovering.
Right, yes. We
So
that will be my first question now, when attending conferences. Is there a yacht club involved?
should I bring my bikini?
Should
The
always
answer to
bring your
that is
bikini.
always no.
Oh.
I don't know,
Every time I
Kevin. I
ask that
think I
question,
think you'd look smashing in a bikini.
Yeah.
I
I
think,
do. I
yeah,
rock it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think you should hold yourself back.
It's all because of the man boobs, though. It's the only way I can pull that off.
Oh my
So,
God. Oh,
yes.
Kevin, what's in the news?
Okay. Speaking of co-writing, I thought you were about to announce something.
No.
But
Yeah.
Christine is co-authoring something with a little guy named. No, that's not true. No, that's true. However, James Patterson is co-authoring something. James Patterson and MrBeast pinning a thriller novel. TV and film rights attracting serious heat. An eight-figure bidding war has broken out on the rights to a new thriller novel from the unlikely pairing of James Patterson and MrBeast, aka Jimmy Donaldson. It's a thriller set around a competitive game not dissimilar to Squid Games. Players fight to survive deadly tests held in dangerous locations around the world as they battle to become, quote, the one. One source said it was going under the title The Most Dangerous Game, but this hasn't been confirmed. So
Yeah.
that's it. That title's
This
too on the
is
nose.
so
Yeah,
fascinating
I'm sure
to
it'll
me.
change. I know. I was like, Mr. Beast, are you kidding?
It is
I
I mean, it's
interesting.
never
cool.
know what to think about celebrity books because I just always think they're ghostwritten. And maybe that's not being fair to them, but I don't
Well,
know. And I
Well,
don't know if
it's
that even
interesting.
matters. I don't know. It's so odd,
Well,
though.
I think, there must be like some brainstorming going on that this would be shaping the book maybe in a way that
no, look,
would not
Mr.
have been a
Beast is
James
writing the
Patterson book.
entire novel and then giving it to James Patterson.
Really?
That's the way
Okay,
you do these
sure.
things now.
That's cool.
I'm
I like that. I
normalizing
also
that.
saw today that Dwayne The Rock Johnson is co-authoring a true crime book about a Hawaiian crime syndicate. So
Can I
that'll be
say,
interesting
I
too.
know he's everyone's darling. Everyone likes, The Rock. I'm kind of sick of the guy. He's just everywhere. I don't know. I don't
Shut your
know.
dirty mouth, Kevin.
I know. And if I ever met him in person, I'd feel bad about saying
Of
it,
course you would,
because he
because he's
seems like
bigger than you.
he's a good guy.
It's-
No, no, I don't mean,
Never
yes, I'd
meet
feel
your
bad after
heroes.
getting the
That's all I'm
pounding.
gonna say. I know he's not your hero, but never.
I
I
met
don't
my
know.
hero. He was lovely, and I was a bumbling idiot. So
Yeah.
there's that true
Well,
story.
that's good for you.
I'm like, I cannot speak or form coherent sentences.
My
But
secret
he
is
was
to be
lovely.
my own hero. So,
Oh,
Aw.
man. Okay, okay.
I was having a conversation about James Patterson yesterday, and uh, the author I was talking to is has reached a certain level of success, and he was saying, he feels like Patterson may be watering down his effectiveness as a brand by doing all these books,
I don't know.
um, because he's so ubiquitous. I don't think I agree with that either. I mean, I think in a way maybe, but they still sell
I
lots
mean,
and
he
lots
just
of
hit number
copies
two on the New York Times bestseller list.
with
Yeah.
some book
So
called The Writer with
some
some
book with someone who wrote it,
bozo
co-wrote it
named
with it. I
Barker.
forget
Who
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 that was.
was that? Yeah.
Maybe JD.
Something something Barker. Uh,
Only number
yeah,
two, huh? Oh,
Only number two.
sorry, guy.
no, I think he might be watering down the brand maybe with like long time readers, but I do think there's probably value in like and this is why I think people co-write with celebrities.
Yeah,
Not that James Patterson, he is sort of a celebrity in and
yeah,
of himself, but
Hmm.
when you get like the Clintons or the Mr. Beasts of the world, you branch out to these other sectors that may not have picked up a normal James Patterson book, but they will pick up one. Younger kids will probably pick up a book by MrBeast. I mean, he's got a huge following. So if you're trying to, target a new generation of readers, it's a very savvy marketing move.
Yeah, I think it's like in line with what we talked about with Simon and Schuster last week, that like you can keep catering to the same people, but if you want more readers and a wider audience, not that James Patterson needs it, but if you would like a wider audience, you need to do things a little bit differently, right?
Yeah. Well, and I would like to think that he's not doing it necessarily like for his name, but to just keep perpetuating reading. And in that way, I do think, like I said,
he does have that as a mission too. You do know that about him if you've followed him for any length of time, regardless how you feel about his work. I mean, he's influential. He's an excellent marketer. And I think, by bringing in people like MrBeast and others, like he is enticing generations of people to read. I mean, there's people out there who probably wouldn't pick up a book unless they saw MrBeast on the cover,
Right. Yeah.
So,
exactly. And then they pick it up and they like it. And then they go, well, what else has this Patterson guy done? And, and then maybe that leads to co-authors and they go, what else has this co-author done? And it kind of ripples out from there. I mean, yeah, I don't begrudge celebrity co-authorships or books. I just always wonder about them, and maybe I shouldn't, but I guess that's just that side of me. I always want to know the truth. Like, did you really write this? It's fine if it's a
I do want to know that process.
Yeah, but, and I wish JD was here because I know he knew about this before it was announced because he talked to Jim about it, and he said
knows everything before it's announced.
I know he does. He said that it was just like when he talked to him, Jim was so excited about working with him, and I'm like, maybe he just did this for fun. Like you're at the level where you're like, this would be fun.
Yeah, that's how. I mean, there's got to be. So he's done this with like Dolly Parton.
Yeah,
he's done it with Bill Clinton. Yeah, I think there may be something to be said about that. Like, you get to a certain level of success, you get to pick and choose who you do these with.
Yeah. Who would you want to write with?
If you could pick a celebrity, because they have different creative processes. I do know, I don't know his real name, MrBeast. So Jimmy.
Oh, it was there. I forget. Jimmy Donaldson.
So I have, he's very interesting. I've heard him talk through like other where he talks about like the process and how he scaled, and he's quite, again, like you get two marketing people together, he knows how to target his audience. So it will be very interesting to see, what they do outside of the book. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, that's true. The marketing's going to be interesting.
It'll be very, I mean, and
here's what I'm curious about, and then we probably need to move on. But there was a whole controversy recently with MrBeast over a show like what they're talking about, like over a competition. And all the participants.
That's what he does.
Right, that's what he does. Okay, I mean, I don't know much about MrBeast.
I don't either. Actually, I
only know
confession. Really? I'm not young and hip.
My son and my husband watch him. So he does sort of like. It's a very PG version of Squid Games.
Okay.
There's no murder and death involved, but he just does these crazy things where like, they have a grocery store and people get in there and they have to stay in the grocery store for like 2 weeks. And basically just live. But they'll come in and they'll give them like different incentives. Like, I'll give you $5,000 if you leave right now, cash in hand. And so, it's sort of this interesting.
What do you get if you stay the whole time?
I think like it depends on what it is. Like $1 million sometimes, $500,000.
I'm getting that $1 million.
Huge prizes.
Yeah. Look, put me in a grocery store. First of all, I love grocery stores.
Yeah. But you probably have to do competitions, right?
So there's like it gets harder and harder and harder. It's not like you just hang out there. So it's very interesting. Like you have to do something. I don't know. They're fun.
As long as it's not like Fear Factor levels of gross, like, eat this bucket of roaches. I'm not, I can pull off a lot of stuff, but I won't do that. I don't know if they
do that. I know sometimes it gets a bit extreme. Like, can you stand for like 36 hours in like a shrinking circle? So it's like, a bunch of people start and then, if you step outside of the circle or if you sit down, like all those different kinds of things. So they're like endurance tests. So
Yeah.
it's basically like willpower. How
I'm not
strong
going
is
on
your
that.
willpower?
I already noped out. Can you stand for 36 hours? Nope. Sit down, bring me snacks. It's not happening.
All right. Moving on. So NaNoWriMo nonprofit shutters. I think we were all kind of expecting this. The nonprofit organization behind National Novel Writing Month has announced its closure due to financial challenges and declining participation, the end of its over 2-decade-long support for writers aiming to complete a novel in November. Recent years saw NaNoWriMo in controversies regarding its stance on the use of AI in writing, leading to significant backlash from the writing community and the resignation of key board members. This contributed to a 6-year downward trend in participation. I think a lot of us saw this coming.
Wasn't there like a weird almost grooming thing
in their Discord? Yeah,
the
right?
admins and they like didn't remove the admin and they made a lot of weird bad choices.
Yeah, there were like lots of things that happened over several years that just kind of trended down participation. But it's kind of weird because NaNoWriMo has been such an institution since I've been a writer.
Yeah.
Everyone gears up. Everyone like is excited to write their novel. And it's kind of sad to see that be done with that aspect of it, the community and the excitement.
Well, the book, I think Chris Beatty is his name, right? The guy who founded all that. I think I got that right. But anyway, his book, No Plot, No Problem, was one of the books that kind of gave me the final nudge to actually start, start a whole writing, book publishing career. Like that idea, that's where I first encountered the idea of like, he put a number on it, they aimed to write a 50,000 word book in 30 days. Like he put numbers on it. And I had this realization that like, I can do that. That's not hard, And it was the whole idea of doing it in 30 days was so stressful at first. And then that became my career for a while, And so I think they're probably responsible for launching a whole lot of writing careers. So it's a little sad to see that go.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see something else for that community and excitement. I don't know if there is something that is there. I know
we'll start something.
There are all these little communities, but there's nothing that was like to the scale that NaNoWriMo was for novelists.
Let's create Writers Inktober.
Yeah, but now December will be maybe an okay time to query agents because their inboxes won't be flooded with NaNoWriMo novels.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Good point. Yeah.
There you go.
Dreaded December.
All right, final story here. Ingram's MediaScout goes live. Ingram Content Group has officially launched MediaScout, a new platform designed to bridge the gap between the book industry and film/television sectors by facilitating book-to-screen adaptations. MediaScout offers search capabilities for over 2.5 million titles and authors, providing detailed rights information to help film and TV industry professionals find books available for screen adaptation. The platform also serves as a resource for publishers to manage and update rights information, streamlining the process for both content creators and seekers. The launch of MediaScout comes shortly after the introduction of similar initiatives like the Blacklist Novel Manuscript Program, indicating a growing trend of platforms that support the discovery and adaptation of literary content into films and TV shows. Love seeing this. This is a trend I'm watching, and I'm involved with a group that is kind of a part of this. This IP play,
This is interesting to see that competition with the Blacklist. I haven't been on it. Can you go on as an indie or do you have to be publisher to put your stuff up there?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I meant to check that out and then I forgot.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've even taken a look at it. And I think, I don't know. I don't want to start guessing. But yeah, I used to go kind of check it out all the time as a hopeful. But those were early days. I stopped paying attention to stuff like that at some point for some reason.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. That's it for the news. Hey, this is Kevin Tumlinson, and it seems to me like you might need a little help. Maybe hand off all that stuff that's keeping you from writing. At Author Anchor, we connect authors with skilled, affordable virtual assistants trained specifically for the publishing world. Your personal VA handles everything from book production to marketing and social media, freeing you up to focus on what matters most, your writing. Book a discovery call today and we'll find that perfect VA for you. Plus, mention the Writers Inc. podcast and you'll get $50 off your first month. Visit authoranchor.com and get matched with your personal VA so you can just write.
Okay, so up this week, it's award-winning lecturer, author, and story consultant DP Lyle. He's here to talk about Outliers Writing University. Outliers is a group of working, best-selling, award-winning authors who give back to the writing community by sharing knowledge and experience through various learning opportunities. So here he is, DP Lyle. DP Lyle, also known as Doug, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I want to talk to you about Outliers. I hear you've got a new venture going on and dedicated to sharing knowledge and experience with the writing community. What inspired you to do this?
Yeah, well, it's if you go all the way back to the origins of it, if you will, Kathy Antrim and I actually met at the old Maui Writers Conference back in the 90s. And we both took the first couple of retreats they had there. They had a school that you would go to the 4 days before the conference started, and you were in there and you were in class all day and writing at night and coming back to class. So you were 4 days in Hawaii, you never saw the sun, before the conference started. But I thought, this is great because this is one-on-one. This is helping me with what I'm working on, not just generic, because I've read 100 books. Then you flash forward and International Thriller Writers got formed.
Right.
And Kathy, for many, many years, we both sat on the board for a long time. She kind of ran everything there and Thriller Fest, the conference and all that. So she was an integral part of making all that happen. And then from the beginning, from our very first one, I set up a school. It was basically a spinoff of the old Maui Writers thing. But what it was is we started with just 8 classes in the first conference of International Thriller Writers, and it was in Scottsdale in July of all things.
Oh, wow.
So we had a captive audience, 110 degrees outside, so nobody wanted to leave. But anyway, everybody really liked that. So that, make a long story short, that evolved into Craft Fest,
right?
Which was the school we did a day and a half. I designed and ran and handled all of that for 15 years. And then we had Mastercraft Fest and we had the online thriller school. And these are all things that I helped either set up or ran or both, actually. So when that kind of wobbled and wasn't the same and ITW wasn't the same and we kind of left, 2 years ago, Kathy and I started talking about this. We need to teach and we need to do it online. We need to do it where people don't have to spend thousands of dollars to go travel. And Zoom, of course, now has come into existence and is now an integral part of business and education and everything else. And it's really evolved over the last decade. And so January of 2024, we launched Outliers Writing University. We have 2 classes a month after month, ongoing forever. We've already got 2025 already populated. We'll start working on 2026 classes. But we have 2 classes a month, and they're about an hour long, and we have teachers that are all best-selling working writers that are gifted teachers. And we know them because we've known them for 20 years. And so we got this cadre of people together. People can go online and look at all the teachers we have, but they're fantastic. I mean, just last night, Meg Gardner did a great class, on storytelling and getting it started and getting it evolved and rolling and all that. I did one a couple of weeks ago on point of view, trying to explain that and simplify it. So, things like that, and that's what our classes are all about. But the goal is to bring along the next generation of writers.
Yeah.
And whether they're published or not, this is a never-ending process to learn writing. I mean, it's forever. You learn something new every time you sit down in front of the computer or scratch on the paper. You learn something every time you read something, every time you talk to someone. You learn more and more and more about the craft, and it never ends. So whatever level people are at in their writing career, we think Outliers can help them improve the things that need improving in their writing, and that's the goal. That's the goal, is to be a better writer.
Yeah. And you, as you said, you have successful working writers teaching craft,
Yep.
which I would imagine is different than, say, an academic teacher. You'd
Sure.
be learning different things. And even if you've done academics, you're going to learn something different from a working writer.
Oh, of course, and there's nothing wrong with MFA programs. They're great, and they teach the craft of what writing, the nuts and bolts of it's all about. But we're interested in teaching people to write commercial fiction.
Yeah.
And so you have people been there, done that, and are actually doing that, and they're vested in this thing. And so, they've learned by lumps and bumps over the decades that they've been writing and the books they've published. And, you go back and look at some of your first books. Like I just published my 26th. I go back and look at some of the first, which I don't do, but because I refuse, because it's like, oh my God, I was a pup. I didn't know what I was doing. Still love the stories though.
Yeah, of course. Well, story is king, right? And
Yeah,
you have
exactly.
a little bit of experience as a writer, so just a little bit, right? So what do you think is the most common hurdle for writers, and how does Outliers help them kind of overcome?
I think, and I can only speak from experience, because again, I like I said, I read probably 100 books on writing, and they were all about the do's and don'ts, and they're all about structure, and they're all about this, and yada, 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 yada. But when you sit down to start to do that, it's like you're almost handcuffed. You're almost afraid to write the thing because, well, it's not perfect. It's terrible. I'm not as good as that. And what do they really mean by that? And what does they really mean? Well, you just start writing, and you write, and you write, and you write, and you write. So the one thing that I always tell writers is forget all the rules, forget all the 3-act structure, forget all the first turning point and second turning point, all that stuff, because all it's going to do is you're going to start figuring out, how am I structuring this rather than telling the damn story.
Mm-hmm.
And the single most important thing that sells a book is voice.
Yeah.
Over anything else. Yeah. And if you get, when editors and agents say, I'm looking for something fresh, what they're doing is looking for a fresh voice.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much every story's been told. There's nuances to all of them, but there's only 2 stories. Somebody comes, somebody goes. That's it. Something, some situation, something, some weather event comes into a person's life and knocks it off balance, or they go somewhere and get involved in something that's stranger in a strange land. But the whole story is about trying to get life back in balance again. And so that's the only 2 stories. And so tell it your way. Get out of the way and write it. And you're going to write horribly. That's fine, because writing is rewriting and rewriting and rewriting, and then you fix it.
Yeah.
But what was it Hemingway said, or was attributed to him? I'm not sure he ever said it. Write drunk, edit sober.
Yeah.
And what he means is get out of the way and tell your story. I wish I had learned that from Jump Street.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And you just hearing you say that, I read a lot of craft books when I was starting to, and it always felt like, if you've ever golfed, like getting a golf lesson and it breaks your golf swing.
Destroyed it.
Yeah, you've moved into a different part of the brain, right? You're thinking instead of using that muscle memory and doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
We golfers always joke about that. But taking a lesson will screw up your golf game for 2 months.
Absolutely. It
may get better,
will.
And you may take some things that will help you in the long run, but for 2 months it's worse.
Yeah, and I feel like every time I read a craft book, I'm like, my swing is broken now, and I can't
exactly, because there's too many rules.
Yeah, exactly.
And you really want to sit down like you're sitting down with a friend and spinning a yarn.
Yeah.
And that's really what you want to do at the end of the day.
Yeah. And voice is so tricky. So I'm curious, how do you help writers find their voice? Because agents always say we want voice, readers want voice.
Yep.
And it's this elusive thing that is so difficult to pin down and
almost impossible to define, except it's like art. You know it when you see it.
Yeah.
You can't describe Leonardo da Vinci, but when you see it, you say, oh.
Yeah.
Caravaggio, oh. Somebody said, well, it's light and dark. What does that mean? Oh, right. Now I see it. I always tell people that voice comes from 3 things: knowledge, experience, and confidence. Knowledge is read. Read everything you can get your hands on. Read out of your genre. Read mysteries and thrillers and literary, and read everything, and pay attention to what you're reading. Once you start writing, you don't read for pleasure anymore.
True.
You're learning with every sentence, and then the experience is writing. Write, and keep writing. Every sentence you put down is going to get better and better and better, but that experience does that. And once you get those two figured out, then you have the confidence to say, all right, to heck with all of you people. This is my story, and I'm going to tell it my way.
Yeah.
And once you do that, you have jumped over a huge hurdle. Doesn't mean it's going to be good. Doesn't mean it's going to be bad. It just means it's going to be yours. And it's always going to need fixing. So don't sweat the small stuff. Tell the story. So I always say write fast and then go back and edit. Get the story done. Get it out. Now you know the story. Now go back and fix it.
Yeah. I love that. The confidence is the hard one for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it took me years to realize that, hey, you're not James Lee Burke or Elmore Leonard, but you're not bad. So you just keep going. Do it your way. And do the work or it won't.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about all the things you have, because I was looking at all these programs and there's a range of them. You have conferences, you have intensive boot camps. I would love to hear about them. Let's start with the ongoing writers conference. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
That's the one that people can subscribe to. And the point is you pay an annual fee or you pay monthly. You can do either way. It's very reasonable, especially for what you get. And that entitles you to 24 classes. 2 a month for 12 months. So you can start anytime you want. So let's say you start April the 1st, then you pay a year, you're all the way through March of the next year. So you can jump in anytime. We also have our old classes. This is a new thing, that they're for sale. So if someone missed a season 1, if you will, or year 1, we're in year 2 now, a class, oh man, I really would have loved to have heard that one, well, you can purchase that class. We give you 2 weeks access to the video, and you can sit there and watch it as many times as you want, take all the notes you want. So it never really goes out of style, but that's the annual thing, and it goes on, and it's going on forever, and we're constantly massaging it and making it better and better, and incorporating more teachers into it. We have a pretty strong group right now that really love to teach. So we don't have a lot of room to take on others, but we're always looking for new voices, if you will, to teach different topics. And the other thing we have is what we call our intensive classes.
Yeah.
And those are specialized classes. We've had homicide detectives, and we've had forensic psychologists like Catherine Ramsland, and we had a class on understanding the Amazon algorithm and how to promote your books better. These are kind of outside of the craft writing thing, but they're things that every writer needs to know. So those are specialized. They can either be 1 class, 2, 3. We've had them up to 4 classes, and they'll be usually on Wednesday nights. We do those because their other classes are on Tuesday. And so you show up, you have 4-hour classes, say, in a 4-part thing. And they're on a particular topic that is useful to writers. And then we have boot camp.
Yeah. Boot camp.
Boot camp is small, hands-on, like a critique group with a mentor. And so we limit that to 5 students in each class. And you basically submit 10 pages a week before every class. The instructor will go through it and edit it and offer suggestions, and it's things that you're working on. So if you want to go and it's 6 classes over a 12-week period. So if you want, so they're every other week. If you want to get through the first 60 pages of your manuscript and have them critiqued and improved and massaged and edited by someone who's been there, done that, then that's what this is all about. My God, I wish I'd have had this 25 years ago.
Yeah. So is that usually what people are working on, the first 60 page of their novels?
Usually.
Yeah.
But we've had people that, they'll be disjointed. I want these 10 pages. That's fine. Most people just go for the first 60 pages and go through it. We had, I had one student last time that on the 4th session, the pages were like the start of a whole new book. And I said, you changed it. Yeah, I want to do this one. Fine. I don't mind. Fine. We're going to work on whatever you want to work on, because this is your chance to work on your stuff,
Right.
one-on-one, face-to-face.
Yeah. Would you recommend the early pages? Because those are so important, especially
Sure.
if you're looking to, eventually
Sure.
tell
And
that
then context is everything.
context.
You can help someone with a story if they give you chapter 20. It helps to know chapters 1 through 19, because
Yeah.
you can see things in the story and say, well, this is okay, but what might be better is this because of what happened in chapter 5. Oh, yeah, I see that now. Again, rewriting.
Right.
We do that. I'm a pantser, so I just start writing, and I always get 40, 50,000 words into it and panic saying it's awful. But, and you have to go back and fix some things every now and then while you're doing that. But that's okay. And that's what I mean by continuity and context. So most people probably get the most out of it if they start page 1.
Yeah. And what kind of things do you look for when you're mentoring writers through this program?
Well, we look for story, obviously. Does the story hold together? Does it make sense? We look for characters. Are these characters believable? Do I like them? Am I going to follow them? Do I care what happens to them? We look for voice, of course. Is there a better way of saying this? And then we look for craft. Don't use passive voice. This is a clunky sentence. Break it up into 3. All the things you learn, even though on your first drafts you still make all those mistakes, but sometimes you catch them while you're doing them. But if not, when you go back and do the first read through, which is just the read through to get everything kind of seamed together, you see those things and fix them. Because why? Well, you've been there before and you've done it dozens and dozens and dozens of times. So the students haven't. And so you say, okay, don't you think this makes more sense? Yes.
Yes.
And it's merely a suggestion. If you think what you're doing is better, absolutely run with it. It's your story.
Yeah. Fantastic. And I think the other thing you offer is the book talk.
Yeah, we've done a few of those, and we're probably going to do some more. They're really kind of fun. We really wanted to make it almost a monthly thing, but we are so swamped with all the stuff we have to do to keep these other balls in the air. We haven't done that. But what we were doing was Eventbrite events, which are free to everybody, and we just blast them out, and everybody shows up, and we just talk about stuff.
Nice.
Character or plot or whatever, and it's very informal and back and forth and all of that. So we really want to do more of that, but we just don't have the bandwidth right now.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you guys are doing a lot. So you've also worked on TV shows. You like Law and Order, Pretty Little Liars. How does that experience with TV writing? How do you bring that to Outliers?
Well, we haven't, except we have had people talk on screenwriting, and we want to get more people to talk on screenwriting, because a lot of people want to write a screenplay.
Right.
And I wrote one way back many years ago on my very first book, and I did it just for the experience. I know that they are a slave to story structure, and I said, well, I want to do this. I want to do this and see what it's all about. It was fun. I always say anybody can write a screenplay. It's very easy, but you can't write a good one. Good ones are very, very hard.
Yes.
And what it does is it makes you be succinct, in your little descriptive paragraphs, and in your dialogue. Your dialogue's got to be so tight when you're writing a screenplay, because you got 120 pages, and most of them are white space. So you don't have a lot of words to throw down on the page. So it forces you to have an economy of writing. And that's what I like about that. I read screenplays from time to time because it does that. It kind of reinforces that brevity, if you will. So I went in these shows that I worked on. I only worked with the writers. I've been on Hollywood sets before. Kill me now. I'm not the kind of person that stands around with not much happening. I'm busy, and literally, if you've ever been on a movie set, in 5 hours they can get a minute of screen time. It's just, I don't know how they survive, because it is really, really tedious. But there's a lot of balls to keep in the air. I understand it, lighting and sound and camera positions and all these things have to be tested and retested and retested and retested. And pretty soon you're saying, can I go to sleep now? Can I go somewhere else? But I work with the writers.
Right.
And screenwriters are very clever people. The ones I've worked with are very smart, and they know very much about storytelling because, again, they have to be succinct.
Yeah. And it's important for commercial fiction too to be able to do that, to keep that
Absolutely.
story moving forward.
Elmore Leonard, baby. Everybody should read Elmore Leonard over and over again. He's the master at brevity.
That's true. Fair enough. Yeah. So I also wanted to ask a little bit about your publishing imprint,
Yeah.
Outliers Publishing. You
Yeah.
have an imprint for mystery and thriller fiction. Tell me a little
Right.
bit about that.
And we're setting up one for nonfiction, which Stephen James, we're doing 3 of his books now. Well, Suspense Magazine and Suspense Publishing were around for many, many years. John and Shannon and Rob done that, I guess, almost 2 decades, and they published hundreds of books. Well, Kathy and I, who created this thing, we brought John and Shannon in as partners in this thing, mainly because of the publishing aspect. The goal was always to do this. Suspense published maybe half a dozen of my books over the years. I've had 5 or 6 publishers, but they've done maybe half a dozen, the whole Kane Harper series. So we've just kind of rolled Suspense Publishing into Outliers, and they're really one entity now. And so we have it under this umbrella. And so we are publishing. We just, I think, signed a new writer, and we've got others that we're looking at. We get submissions, and we read them, and like any other publisher, they either work or they don't. We don't do that many books anymore. We do fewer ones because we want good ones. But I think it's something else to offer writers, so they just don't go slap it on Amazon and find out really, that could have been better. You probably needed an editor. We do have editors, we take it seriously and do that. So yeah, that's a new venture, and it's working. I think we got like 4 or 5 books coming out. Actually, my 4th Kane Harper book was the first one we printed, and it came out in October or something like that. So we got, like I said, some of Stephen James and some others in the pipeline. So we're that's another adventure. And it's kind of fun.
Fantastic. So did you say you're taking submissions for that, or do you?
Sure. If you go to the website, there's submission thing on there. And of course, agents and editors, if you want, to submit your clients' books, we want to look at them and see if they're good enough, and if we're interested, and if we think we can do it right. And then we also have probably a little more marketing than most publishers, because we have our footprint's getting broader and broader and broader, mainly through the school and through the social media and through all the stuff we're doing. And so that takes some of the burden off the writer, which really doesn't, I didn't know, and most writers don't know how to go out in that world effectively. You can't just slap it on X and Facebook and think it's going to work. You gotta be more focused than that, and you gotta create better stuff than that attracts attention. But and then Goodreads and BookBub and all those things are important. How do you get on there? How do you do that? Well, we know how to do all that. Plus, Suspense Magazine, that went away for almost 2 years, is coming back.
Oh, wonderful.
And it's going to be Outliers Suspense Magazine, a quarterly thing, except instead of printing it and mailing it, it's now all going to be electronic, but it's going to have reviews and articles and interview, all kinds of stuff in it. So we're going back, bringing that magazine back that John and Shannon published all those years, and it became too much.
Yeah.
Now we got a simpler way of doing it.
That's fantastic. So what are you looking for in submissions? Suspense? Are you across the board, mystery, thriller,
pretty much
crime?
No.
Anything goes? Yeah.
Yeah, most of what we get is in what the general umbrella of crime fiction, thrillers, mysteries, things like that, cozies. But we're looking to do more literary and more romance and more cozies, and you name it. We're willing to look at anything that we think is good. Yeah.
And you're also doing nonfiction.
Oh yeah,
nonfiction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I saw that you talked a little bit about the emphasis of storytelling elements in nonfiction products.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that? How do you weave narrative into factual content?
Yeah, it's what they call narrative nonfiction. They got a bunch of words, but it basically was, if you want, it was faction, and it was probably invented by Truman Capote within Cold Blood. Even though there's a lot of controversy about how much he made up and how much he didn't. But the point is that it's a true story but you can add storytelling elements to how you tell the story. Unfortunately, sometimes that line gets so blurry that you can't tell fiction from nonfiction, and then you got to say, do I trust this as a textbook? Being a physician, I grew up with textbooks, so textbooks have to be absolutely dead solid factual.
Yes.
When I wrote Forensics for Dummies, factual, but read Forensics for Dummies. The language and everything is light and funny and, off the wall and a little goofy and all that, but the facts are the facts, and it stays that way. So I think people ask me, well, you might write both fiction and nonfiction. What's the difference? And I say, well, they're exactly the same, only different. With nonfiction, you do all your research, you get all your ducks in a row, you organize your material. And then when you sit down to start writing, don't forget to add some storytelling elements to it, some storytelling language to it. Have that lighter language, have that even humor, but make sure the facts are correct.
Yeah.
So you do all the research ahead of time. With fiction, I always recommend do as little research as possible. If you need to do something, do it. But if you go down that rabbit hole and spend 3 weeks researching and, by God, I'm going to put this in there because I spent so much time and effort on it. Yeah. No. Stories don't care about facts. So get what you need to get the story launched. If you need to know about this, that, or the other, go look it up, find out, research it, and now you're ready to tell your story. Maybe it's setting. Maybe it's what does the U.S. Marshal Service do? Maybe you need to know those things in general terms. But then just start writing and do the research as you go along.
Yeah.
When you run across something, say, oh, I need to know a little bit more about this, to write this scene, then go do it right there. And then write that scene. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. So I love that. I think what you're talking about in nonfiction is bringing voice to it too. We want voice even in nonfiction, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, everybody go read In Cold Blood. I mean, it's truly one of the great books of all time. And the writing is outrageously good because Capote was a crazy man, but he was a great writer. And this story reads like a novel. And you have to stop every now and then and say, this was true. Mm-hmm. This really happened, Yeah. I felt the same way after I read Helter Skelter. I said, this can't be real.
Yeah.
And it was written a little more factual, but there's Bugliosi put a lot of storytelling techniques in it. So the first time I was ever in L.A., I went to Sharon Tate's house. I went there and looked through the fence to see it. I had to see something concrete because this story was so novel-like. Right. As horrific as it was hard to believe it was real.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what you want.
Yeah.
You want the writer to come away saying, wow, what an incredible story. Oh, wait a minute. That really happened.
Yeah. Excellent. Perfect. And Outliers can help you do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll work on that.
Wonderful. So tell me, what's next for Outliers? Or are there any new programs, genres, anything you're excited to develop, new directions you're hoping to take the platform?
Well, like you've, like I talked about, we have these different products that we're putting out there, and I think they pretty much cover
a lot.
the various levels of learning, if you will, particularly with boot camp, which is we've just had one session of that, but the second one's getting ready to start, I think, March the 3rd, our second round of that. Kathy's working on an Outliers cruise. Ooh. So that maybe we can get a block of rooms and get a bunch of people to go, and then maybe a couple of afternoons during the cruise have a little class session about stuff, face to face. We've talked about maybe writing retreats, where it's more where people are just going and writing and talking about writing, and rather than anything formal like a conference, because we, like I said, we are so involved in running Thriller Fest for 15 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, running a conference is a huge undertaking and very risky, and you got to be on the line for a lot of expenses and stuff, and it's just a lot of balls to keep in the air. So we're looking at doing some things that kind of you sniff around the edges, seem that way, but they're not really. They're different, more relaxed.
Yeah, I love that. And I was talking to a friend about this a while ago who was trying to look to run something. I said, just get a bunch of writers together. That's what we like to do. We like to talk writing, go back to our room and write, and socialize, and like we
Right.
don't have to put that much programming into it because we want to write and we want to connect with other writers, right? That's what
Well, in
it's
all honesty, you probably learn as much about writing when you're not writing as if you're in a bar at a conference.
exactly.
Because you're talking to other writers and you're talking about stuff.
Yeah.
They're telling stories and you're absorbing those stories and you're telling stories and you're talking about writing and you're talking about this. You learn a lot just hanging around with other folks. So
Yeah, we call that BarCon, and that's my favorite part of any conference is BarCon.
any conference. In fact, you should not have a conference in a hotel that doesn't have a great bar.
Absolutely.
Because writers like to drink, they like to talk, and they like to hang out. Yes.
That's what we do. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for coming on and tell us about Outliers. Where can they find your website? Anyone who's interested in checking it out?
Well, you can go to outlierswritinguniversity.com to learn all about that. And mine is dplylemd.com. So you can go there and look at all the stuff I'm doing too. So go to those two and you'll find some stuff. But Outliers is well explained on the website. All the different programs, they're all explained. They're all available. You can sign up at whatever level you want. Even in the ongoing conference, you can buy individual classes if you don't want to subscribe for the whole year. One other thing I'll say about that, these classes that we have, they're always on Tuesday nights at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 Eastern.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's inconvenient, but all the classes remain available to the students for 10 days. So they can go back and click on the link and watch it's better if you're there because you get to ask questions.
Yeah.
But if you're not, you get to watch the class and see everything that went on. Almost everybody has handouts that they send out to all the students, and many are PowerPoints sent out to the students. So they have all the materials and they can actually watch the thing for 10 days. So
fantastic.
Cool.
Okay. Where should we have our writers retreat? Are we doing a Writers Inc. cruise? What is going on?
Yacht Club.
You will not get me on a cruise. Sorry. Absolutely not.
Why not? What if there was a library and an atrium?
Are there other people
just
on
makes
there?
it heavier.
And floating
That
in
makes the
middle
boat
of
heavier.
the ocean.
Right. That's my thing. Everything in the ocean is trying to kill me. So I don't have a desire to help it along.
Listen, I respect their boundaries, all right? I can't live in their home environment, nor do I want to. It's fine.
Okay, so we're not going on a cruise.
Not a cruise. Maybe a river cruise. You could do a river cruise.
Okay, I can do a river cruise.
That'd be different. That'd be good. European River Cruise Conference. Let's for Writers Inktober.
As long as I can eat my way through Italy, I'm there.
There you go.
Interesting. Well, there is the whole airplane issue. I'm gonna hold off a little bit on flying for a while.
Why? No,
we
just
go
kidding.
to Lake Tahoe.
We're not getting into that.
Everyone loves Lake Tahoe.
I do love Lake Tahoe. I haven't been there for more years than I care to admit.
Hey, I'm gonna be honest with you though. I got zero desire or inclination to put on a conference. After I've seen how that sausage gets made, and that is a nightmare. Like it's so time intensive, it's so much more than you think it's going to be. I wouldn't want to be responsible for it. Now, if I
just thought it was going to be the 4 of us at Lake Tahoe. We
could do that. It's a conference of 4. and we can give away a slot to like 2 lucky winners in the audience.
Oh, I like that.
There you go.
They will get all of our focused shenanigans. They're never coming back.
That's fine. I'm used to losing people in the audience.
We're an acquired taste. It's okay.
So Doug had some interesting things to say about Outliers, and I love learning things and meeting people over Zoom. So I'm just curious, what has been valuable for you about participating in those types of things?
I mean, yeah, I think it's always like the other writers. Like you get a lot of really good information, but it's also kind of hard because you can, get a lot of that information other places. And so I think it depends. Like, I think it's the people that really like enhance it, the people that you're around.
Yeah.
Like we met at one.
We did. That's why like Jena and I met on a Zoom conference.
Yeah. And I mean, I have a lot of notes from that conference and I'm sure I absorbed things from that conference, but
Yeah.
the group we formed afterwards is like probably has been the best thing about it and reinforced some of that.
Yeah.
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 As somebody who does a lot of those, like I speak, or I'm some sort of presenter or something at a ton of online conferences and in-person conferences and things. I mean, I like it. I feel like there's a kind of limitation in terms of interaction. But I think that, like, as far as like benefits, like, this is an opportunity for you to there are just parts of the world and parts of the country. We'll just limit it to the US for now, but like, s- you know, you're always told you should try to go to like author conferences and meet other authors and, learn from the pros and things like that. But, it's not always accessible to
Yeah.
people. But,
Yeah.
this age of being able to do it through a Zoom conference or, live stream or whatever has opened that up in a way that it just benefits everybody. Plus, you do get the international component too. Like
Yeah.
now it usually means I have to be up at like, 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, times when I would rather be sleeping. Cause I'm a bedtime guy, but, it means, kind of accommodating the schedule that's
Yeah.
like 15 to 20 hours different, but you end up interacting with people who have a completely different perspective on the industry than you
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think Jen and I would ever met. The one that we did, it was like they usually held it in person. It was because it was the COVID times, and it
Oh
was
yeah.
in Utah, and it was expensive. I'm like, I'm not going there. But when they did it online, I was like, oh heck yeah! It was like crazy. I'll go for that, and it was so much
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think it also helps because, I think when you're a new writer, it's very tempting, like, um, he was very knowledgeable, but I slightly disagree with like the, just write and don't worry about structure because if sometimes structure can help teach you how to find your voice and how to tell the story. You might not know what the story is. And I think sometimes, like, especially if, you're talking about like, you save up and you spend a couple $1,000s to go to a conference, like,
Yeah.
we all have different biases at play, right? And so now you're in like that sunk cost bias. Like, well, I spent 3 grand on this, so this is what I learned at this conference. This is how I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna
do
apply
it.
it. By
yeah,
God. Yeah.
Right.
I, you
And that
know,
might not be the best process for you, but when you are able to go to a couple and,
yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
cheaper and, it's not as intensive on your time,
hmm
then
Yeah.
you might hear other things and go, oh, you get other perspectives. And I think that that's really beneficial.
yeah,
I
and
think,
I think like the connection because these are working writers who are doing it and being successful, and
yeah.
that is always very valuable to me to talk to people who are steps ahead of you and doing well in the industry. I always find that super valuable. But what I thought was interesting, and I think you're right, like with the structure, some of this depends what level you're at. We
Yeah.
got talking about voice, which is very high level
Yeah.
writing. Um, and I liked what he said. Like when you do think about structure, when I do think about things um deliberately, sometimes I get broken when
Yeah.
I'm writing. So I do kind of like you need to know the rules. I think you need to know structure and all
Mhm.
of that. But then once you do, forget the rules, tell the story your way, like you're talking to a friend. Like voice is very elusive, and
Yeah.
I do think if
I,
someone can help
For
you
me,
with that, that's
I,
valuable.
I feel like though there is benefit to just relaxing about it and letting the story come
Yeah,
out first and then taking the time to shape it after the fact. And what I've discovered, what I think this has impacted my career is that, once I once I got to a point where I could fall in love with editing and rewrites, it changed the approach I took to the actual writing, and then the structure and
yeah,
voice and everything became more top level for me as I produced. So it's okay to be wobbly on the bike, and
yeah,
rely on the training wheels for a while, and then suddenly you can ride, the whatever they call a
I guess,
cycle across the thing, the country kind of thing. What is it? It's
yeah.
not a marathon. What is that called?
Uh,
Decathlon or something? I don't know.
sure.
sure.
I'll go with
But
that.
yes, let's go with that.
I think like for me, to be honest, like I didn't outline because I just didn't even understand what that meant and what that looked like. And I didn't know the story I was telling. And so I sat down and I just wrote. But I tell you what, after trying to edit 2 manuscripts that had to be completely torn apart and like reworked
Yeah.
in a way that like made me want to curl up in a ball and cry for hours every day, like once I sort of like realized, oh, I can just go like find the structure and build the house that way.
Yeah.
Like I would never, ever, ever go back. And
But see, you had the advantage of going through that experience, and that shaped you.
Well, I
So
think
but I don't
can
know
make a
that it was
strong
good
argument.
shaping.
Yeah.
No, it did shape you, because now you see the value of outlining and figuring out the plot ahead of time. You had to do it wrong a couple of times in order to figure out the
and
right way to
sometimes
go.
you do have to do things wrong, but listen, I'm a very tenacious person. If I want to do something, like I will do it no matter how terrible and painful and difficult it is. But that is not a lot of people. And I do think that I would never give advice to tell someone to do it wrong so that they can go through that, because I don't know that, maybe they don't have the temperament to come through the other side. And yes, that's how you build self-esteem and confidence. But anyone who's had kid know, you don't, as much as it's funny to kick your, we joke about kicking the kid into the deep end and, oh, that'll teach him to swim. Like that raises a whole lot of other problems.
It's not about
deal with.
It's not about encouraging them to do it wrong. It's about giving yourself permission to just try things and figure out what's wrong, what's right. That's
it's the confidence part, like you said. Like the confidence part is what's hard. And he's saying voice is related to confidence, right? The knowledge is reading, experience is writing, voice is confidence, and confidence is difficult. Like I think he was more saying just don't be like, is this matching the 3x structure exactly? Like you don't want to be worrying, like know the stuff, but be confident in what you're writing. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know. Yes, I see that. I do think that though, for me, like the structure, going into those details is where I find the voice.
Yeah. The
voice to me isn't the story. I mean, I've explained this before. To me, voice is the cinematography of the movie. It's the lens that you're choosing to shoot with, the camera you're choosing, the angles, the lighting. And you can't make those decisions until you have a set built and you have actors and you have dialogue. I mean, because what happens in the scene matters and how you convey it, I think.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. It's like the green filters in Rain and 7.
Right. Yeah. Or all the different, how each story in that movie, what was it? Traffic? Is that the movie I'm thinking of? Where it's like every POV had a slightly different tint to it. Like that was very interesting. That's voice to me. And I don't know how you do that without building the structure first.
Yeah.
You just do.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe.
Oh, okay. My cat has decided to come say hello. So
it's not a podcast unless you got a tiny bit of cat butt.
Podcast.
Yeah.
All right. Up next week, it's Alan Lestufka. Hopefully I said that right. Alan Lestufka is a Hoffer Award-winning author and the owner of Shortwave Publishing, an independent small press. Shortwave offers a selection of original books, zines, and online stories with a focus on dark and speculative genre fiction. So that's what's coming up next week, Alan Lestufka. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.